We're starting in on a new play today. It's new play day on Shakesyear, and I'm being a dork about it, but I'm excited because this one is a comedy. We're going to work on London Prodigal, which is a comedy, which of course, for the purposes of this project, means that there's likely not going to be that many monologues in it, and it won't take us very long to get through it. It is also a play that's written in one act, but there's 13 scenes in that act. So if you were to perform this, it would still take about 2 hours to get through the whole thing, but just interesting from a structure perspective. And this one, it was first published in 1605, though they're not sure when it was actually first written. There's debate. It could have been written as far back as like 1591, could have been written as late as like 1604, but it was first published in quarto format in 1605. But then it wasn't in the first folio or the second. It was published in the third folio in like 1664, I think is when that was. And both of those first two times that it was published with Shakespeare's name on it as the author, but there's been a lot of debate since then as to whether or not he actually wrote it. Some of Shakespeare's plays weren't published until after he died, so like that's not necessarily the issue that it wasn't published until the third folio. But there's stuff about themes and where stuff came from and word choice and word usage and all these sorts of things that make a lot of people think that Shakespeare maybe didn't actually write this one, even though his name was on it the first two times that it was published. It could have been published with that name on it in the hopes that that would sell more copies, because it came out at a time when Shakespeare was a big enough name that people would have wanted to buy his plays just because they were written by him. So it could have been published under a false name just to try to sell more copies. But anyway, yeah, so that's London Prodigal. We start off, we've got the Flowerdale family. We're going to have old Flowerdale, Uncle Flowerdale, and then later Matthew Flowerdale coming into all of this. But we first start out with old Flowerdale and Uncle Flowerdale. And those two are brothers, and they're named as they are because of their relationship to Matthew. So Uncle Flowerdale is Matthew's uncle, and Old Flowerdale is Matthew's father. Old Flowerdale has actually been away in Venice for quite some time, and he has been sending money back to his uncle to give to his Old Flowerdale has been sending money to Uncle Flowerdale to give to Matthew to take care of him because that's his son. But old Flowerdale has now come back, and he sees his brother, who is Uncle Flowerdale. Sorry, it's all very confusing. And he's like, so how has my son been doing? Tell me how my son has been doing. And the uncle is like, you don't even want to know. Your son is a hot mess. And old Flowerdale is like, brother, what is the manner of his life? How is the name of his offenses? If they do not relish altogether of damnation, his youth may privilege his wantonness. I myself ran an unbridled course till 30, nay, almost till 40. Well, you see how I am. For vice, once looked into with the eyes of discretion, and well balanced with the weights of reason, the course past seems so abominable that the landlord of himself, which is the heart of his body, will rather entomb himself in the earth or seek a new tenant to remain in him, which, once settled, how much better are they that in their youth have known all these vices and left it, than those that knew little and in their age runs into it? Believe me, brother, they that die most virtuous hath in their youth lived most vicious, and none knows the danger of the fire more than he that falls into it. But say, how is the course of his life? Let's hear his particulars. So, old Flowerdale, what he's saying here is, are you sure my son is a hot mess? Maybe he's just being a young man. And it's better that he gets all of these vices out of his system as a young man than ignores all of that and becomes a really horrible person later in life. He's like, I used to mess around when I was younger, but look at how I turned out. He's like, I promise you, people who led not so great youths turn out to be the most virtuous people, as opposed to people who knew none of that and decide to go experimenting later in life. So he's like, tell me what kind of horrible stuff is my son doing? And Uncle's like, well, he swears and then he breaks his promises. And old Flowerdale is like, well, that's not so bad. It's better, like, if he's swearing to something that he shouldn't be swearing to, it's better that he doesn't, like, fulfill that. And he's like, yeah, but also he drinks. And he's like, who doesn't? That's not really even a vice. And every vice that Uncle Flowerdale lists off, old Flowerdale is like, that's really not that big of a deal. And Uncle Flowerdale is just getting more and more frustrated with these. He's like, I can tell, like, you really don't even want to hear anything bad about him. But then Matthew starts to come in. They can hear him coming, and Uncle's like, oh, that's him. I bet he's coming in, and he's going to ask me for money because he always asks me for money. And old Flowerdale is like, okay, just shh. Don't tell him that I'm his dad. Like, I'm in disguise. I'm going to be a sailor named Christopher, and pretend when he comes in, pretend that his father is dead. And I have this fake will that I'm going to give to him. So just don't give it away that I'm actually his dad. We're going to pretend that I'm just this other sailor who's in from Venice. So Matthew comes in and he's like, Uncle, how you doing? And Uncle Flowerdale is like, what do you want? He's like, I want some money because I want to go and I want to try to win this woman loose, and I need some money in order to get there. And Uncle's like, I have lent you so much money, I'm not giving you any more money. And he's like, no, I promise I'll pay it back. And he's like, what are you going to pay it back with? You don't have anything. And Matthew is like, no, I do have something. My dad sent me a letter that he's sending me these pieces of velvet that are on this ship that just came in, and I don't have it with me, but I have these. I'm going to be getting these pieces of velvet, and you can have one of them as payment, because velvet was a nice fabric and they like that sort of thing then. And Uncle's like, yeah, let me see this letter from your dad. And Matthew's like, well, I left it in my other pants. Literally, he does the I left it in my other pants thing. And Uncle's like, well, okay, then where's the velvet? And he's like, no, I'll go and get the velvet for you, but I need the 10 pounds first, which back then actually was a lot of money. He's like, if you can lend me this money, I'll come back to you at a later date with the velvet. And Uncle's like, well, okay, at least when was this letter written? And Matthew's like, oh, this letter was written like beginning of October. And Uncle's like, oh, that's funny because I have a letter saying that your dad died last June. At which point old Flowerdale steps up and he's like, yeah, that's the thing. And, I was sent here to bring this will to you. I was sent to, and I have your dad's will, and like, don't cry too hard at the passing of your father. Cause Matthew's like, he doesn't seem all that upset that his father has died. He's like, no, like, I hope that he died well. And I'm just in shock now. I can't cry right now, but give me a couple days and then I'll cry. And he's like, well, okay, but I have this will, and I guess I hand this will over to you. And in tomorrow's monologue, we will get to hear Matthew reading the will and find out how he reacts to it. So I think this is going to be a fun one because it's a comedy. It's lighthearted. We've already got somebody in disguise pretending who they're not supposed to be and spying on somebody else, and we've got a fake will. I mean, obviously hilarity is going to ensue. So come on back tomorrow for some more hilarity. Mwah.